Good afternoon to all of you. So welcome to our virtual class for computer organization and architecture. So this is week 3. So on your week 3, we have the basic operations or the basic operational concepts. So the basic functions of a computer. So to execute a given task as per the appropriate program. The program consists of the instructions stored in memory. So there are 4 basic types of computer operations. So we have input, process, output, and storage. So the basic functions of a computer. So or inputting, processing, outputting, storing. So although even basic computers are capable of sophisticated processing, the processors themselves are only capable of performing the simple mathematical operations. So taking data and instructions from a user, processing the data as per instructions, and it displaying or storing the processed data are the 4 major functions of a computer. So these functions are also known as the input function, process function, output function, and storage function, respectively. So at the fundamental level, computers operate through those 4 functions: the input, process, output, and storage. So to provide this function, a computer uses its components or devices. So usually, components of a computer are designed to perform only one of these 4 functions. But some specialized components or devices are designed to perform 2, 3, or all 4 functions. So for example, a hard disk can perform 3 functions: the input when files are read, storage when files are saved, and output when files are written. So components or devices of a computer based on the function in which they are used can be classified into 4 major types: the input devices, output devices, storage devices, and processing devices. So for example, if a component processes a given instructions, the component is known as the processing device. Or if a device displays the processed data, the device is known as the output device. So in input function and devices, a computer is a data processing machine. It does nothing until a user or a script or a program. So it provides the data that needs to be processed and the instructions that tell it how to process the data. So the input, the transfer of the information into the system through the use of the input devices. So any standard device or component that a user uses to instruct a computer is known as the standard input device. So in other words, the computer uses its standard input devices or components to get instructions from a user. So the most common input devices are the keyboard and mouse. So almost all modern computers have these devices. Other common input devices are scanners, microphones, USB drives, and webcams. So the input data and instructions can also be generated from a non-standard input device such as the hard disk and CD or DVD. So for example, a batch file in the Windows system may instruct the CPU to execute a program or a script at a particular time. So the installation disks are another good example of non-standard input devices. So usually, they contain a script or an executable program that automatically starts the installation process as soon as the disk is read. So the input means the transfer of the data into a the transfer of information into the system. So through the use of keyboard or any other devices or input devices. And then the process function and devices. So once the data and instructions are received by the input function, the computer starts the processing function. So in this function, a computer processes the received data according to the instructions. So to process the input data according to the instructions, the computer uses a CPU. So a CPU is the main processing component of a computer. So it processes user instructions. It executes scripts and programs and runs commands on the OS that provide a platform for installing and using application software. So the processing, it means that this is the retrieval or manipulation of information into a new form. So or it is a result from a search engine. So other important processing components are the auxiliary processors. The auxiliary processors are also known as onboard processors. So auxiliary processors are used in devices to enhance their functionalities. So you can think of an auxiliary processor as the private CPU of a device. So only components or devices that provide the complex functionality such as graphics card, the I/O devices, and network interface cards use auxiliary processors. So for example, if a user draw an image, the auxiliary processor and the graphics card performs all calculations that require in drawing the image on the display device. And then the output function and devices. So after processing the input data, the CPU or the auxiliary processor on the process function sends the process data to the output function or to the default or configured output device. So by default, computers use monitors as the default output device, of course. So the output, it is the representation or presentation rather of information to the user, okay? So it means on the screen. So one example, the default is the computer monitor. So aside from monitor, a variety of output devices are also available. So each output device presents the process data in a different form. So for example, a monitor, a printer, and a speaker displays, prints and plays the process data respectively. So a user, based on his requirement, can connect and use 2, 3, or more output devices to the computer. So for example, after viewing the process data, the user can send it to the printer for printing. And then we have also the storage function and devices. So storing data and information is the fourth major function of a computer. So this function allows us to save the process data for later use. So to store data and information, a computer uses two types of storage components. We have temporary and permanent. So the temporary storage components are used to store data temporarily. So data stored in a temporary storage component is erased when the system is shut down or off. The RAM or the random access memory is a compulsory temporary storage component. A computer uses the RAM to store the running applications and their data. So the permanent storage components are used to store data permanently. So the data stored in a permanent storage component is not erased when the system is shut down. So the hard disk is the most common permanent storage component. So usually all computers have at least one hard disk to store data. So other common permanent storage components or devices are external drives or USB drives and CD and DVD. So the storage, of course, the storing or preservation of information for future use. So like files stored on a hard drive. The basic operational concepts of a computer. So the primary functions of a computer system is to execute program sequence of instructions. So these instructions are stored in a computer memory. So these instructions are executed to process data, so which are already loaded in the computer memory through some input devices. So after processing the data, the result is either stored in the memory for further reference, or it is sent to the outside world through some output port. So to perform the execution of an instruction, in addition to the arithmetic logic unit and control unit, the processor contains a number of registers used for temporary storage of data and some special functions register. So the register, it's a type of a computer memory used to quickly accept, store, transfer data and instructions that are being used immediately by the central processing unit. So it is a temporary storage memory that is built into processor. So the special functions of registers include the program counters, the instruction registers, the memory address registers, and the memory data registers. So the program counter is one of the most critical registers in the central processing unit. So the program counter monitors the execution of the instructions. So it keeps track on which instruction is being executed and what the next instruction will be. So the instruction register IR is used to hold the instruction that is currently being executed. The IR, so it consists of 16 bits. It holds the instruction code. The contents of the IR are available to the control unit, so which generate the timing signals that control the various processing elements involved in the executing the instruction. The two registers, we have the DMAR and the MDR. So MAR or MAR stands for Memory Address Register, whereas the MDR stands for the Memory Data Register. So both are used to handle the data transfer between the main memory and the processor. So the MAR holds the address of the main memory to or from which data is to be transferred, and the MDR contains the data to be written into a read from the address board of the main memory. So whenever the processor is asked to communicate with devices, we say that the processor is servicing the devices. So the processor can service these devices in one of the two ways. So one way is to use the polling routine, and the other way is to use the interrupt or the computer interrupt. So an interrupt, it is a signal from a device attached to a computer or from a program within the computer that requires the operating system to stop and figure out what to do next. So after the interrupt signal is sent, the computer either resumes the running the current program or begins running another program. The polling enables the processor software to check each of the input and output devices frequently. So during this check, the processor tests to see if any devices need servicing or not. So the interrupt method provides an external synchronous input that informs the processor that it should complete whatever instruction that is currently being executed and patch a new routine that will service the requesting device. So figure shows the interconnection between the processor and the memory. So the memory is the storage location, whereas the DMAR or the memory address register, it holds the address of the current instruction. So that is to be fetched from memory, or the address in memory to which data is to be transferred. Whereas the MDR, it holds the contents found at the address held in the MAR, or in memory address register. So, or data which is to be transferred to the main memory. The MDR, or the memory data register, it is the register of a computer's control unit. Okay, that contains the data to be stored in the computer storage, or the data after a fetch from the computer storage. So it acts like a buffer and holds anything that is copied from the memory, so ready for the processor to use it. Whereas the instruction register in computing, the instruction register, or the current instruction register, it is a part of the central processing unit control, or control unit that holds the instruction currently being executed or decoded. So yung mga modern processors natin can even do some of these steps out of order as decoding on several instructions done in parallel. In computing, the instruction register, so it is the part of the CPU's control unit. So the instruction register is another type of the central processing unit register. So that is used to store the instruction that is currently executed or that will be decoded. Whereas the program counter, or PC, it is a register also that manages the memory address of the instruction to be executed next. So the CPU reads the address where the instruction to be executed next is stored from the PC and executes it in sequence. So that is the interconnection between the processor and the memory. So the registers are fast standalone storage location, so that holds data temporarily. So multiple registers are needed to facilitate the operation of the CPU. So some of the registers are the main two registers. We have the memory address register and the memory data register. So to handle the data transfer between main memory and processor, so the memory address register holds addresses, whereas the MDR holds the data. Whereas the IR, or the instruction register, hold the instructions that is currently being executed. The program counter points to the next instructions that is to be fetched from the memory. So the register, it is a type of computer memory used to quickly accept, store, and transfer data and instructions that are being used immediately by the central processing unit. So it is a temporary storage memory that is built into a processor. So the process of the PC, or the program counter to the MAR, or to the memory address register, which the contents of the PC, okay, transferred to MAR, whereas the MAR, okay, transferred to address bus, and then select a particular memory location, and then issues the RD, which is the data register, so which control the signals. And then it reads the instruction present in memory and loaded into MDR, which is the memory data register. So will be placed in the IR. So the IR is the instruction register. So the contents transferred from MDR to IR. So the instruction presents in IR will be decoded by which processor understand what operation it has to perform. So the increments the contents of the PC or the program counter by 1. So it will always incremented by 1 so that it points to the next instructions sa address. So if data required for operation is available in register, it performs the operation. So if data is present in memory, following sequence is also performed. So DMAR, so another process from register. So the MAR is the memory address. Okay, so transfer to address bus. It select the memory location. So where is issued the RD signal. So it reads data via data bus to the MDR. So from the MDR, the data can be directly routed to arithmetic logic unit. So it can be placed in register and then operation can be performed. So the results of the operation can be directed towards output device, memory, or register. Then the normal execution preempted or interrupt. So the interrupt is the signal from a device attached to a computer or from a program within the computer that requires the operating system to stop and figure out what to do next operation. So the computer registers, it is a type of computer memory used to quickly accept, store, and transfer data and instructions so that are being used immediately by the central processing unit. So the registers used by the CPU term as the processor registers. So a processor register may also hold an instruction, a storage address, or any data such as bit sequence or individual characters. The computer needs processor registers for manipulating data and a register for holding a memory address. So the register holding the memory location is used to calculate the address of the next instruction after the execution of the current instruction is completed. So following is the list of some of the most common register used in a basic computer. So we have the register and its symbol, the number of bits, and each function. So we have the data register, which is DR, 16 bits. It holds memory operand. The address register, which is AR, it consists of 12 bits, holds address for the memory. The accumulator, which is the AC, it consists of 16 bits. The processor register. The instruction register, the IR, 16 bits, it holds instruction code. The program counter, which is the PC, 12 bits, it holds address of the instruction. The temporary register, the TR, 16 bits, it holds temporary data. And then the input register, the INPR, 8 bits, it carries input character. And then the output register, or the OUTR, consists of 8 bits, carries output character. Okay, so the following image shows the register and memory configuration for a basic computer. So the memory unit has a capacity of 4,096 words, and each word contains 16 bits. The data register, or the DR, it contains 16 bits, which hold the operand read from the memory location. The memory address register, or the MAR, contains 12 bits, which hold the address for the memory location. The program counter or the PC also contains 12 bits which hold the address of the next instruction to be read from memory after the current instruction is executed. Okay, so that is a function of the program counter. And the accumulator, the AC, it is a register. It is a general purpose processing register. And the instruction read from memory is placed in the instruction register, which is in the IR. And the temporary register, which is the TR, is used for holding the temporary data during the processing. So the input registers or the IR holds the input characters given by the user. So the output register or the OR holds the output after processing the input data. Okay, so that is the register and the memory configuration of a basic computer. Okay, so thank you for listening for today's virtual class. Okay, so I'm Dean Jane.